compromise is to make concessions or accommodations for someone who does not agree with a prevalent set of standards or rules. I mean, the Bible makes it clear that God does not condone compromising his standards. It is Psalm 119 that says, "Joyful are people of integrity who follow the instructions of the Lord. Joyful are those who obey his laws and search for him with all their hearts. They do not compromise with evil, and they walk only in his paths." And see, the issue is all of us have this tendency to be liked by culture, to be respected by our culture. I mean, no one wants to be lonely. And as I always say, truly following Jesus at times can be a very lonely road. So we avoid the lonely road, and what do? We begin to compromise. We begin to shrink back in our witness in the hopes of winning people over. We begin to think that whatever draws more people in, that is what we do. We start to sugarcoat the gospel. We shy away from sharing the whole counsel of God. Why? Because we want it to be palatable to all, accepted by all. At times, to be honest, we are ashamed of Jesus. I mean, let's just cut to the truth. We all have been at this place where we are ashamed to say his name, afraid to share the gospel, afraid to speak truth. Friends, this is dead wrong. We cannot compromise the message of the gospel in order to attract or please people. I mean, we live in a culture that is offended by what we hold near and dear to our hearts when it comes to Jesus, primarily the gospel of Jesus. I mean, we live in a culture where people are offended by the gospel and the implications of it. I mean, we live in a culture where people can't stand the thought of answering to anyone, let alone a God they don't see. I mean, even people who call themselves Christians are offended by the gospel. I mean, you start talking about what the gospel means and the way that it affects how you live your life, and all of a sudden you're on the outside looking in. You're ostracized. And we don't like that. But let me just remind you of something. John the Baptist presented the whole counsel of God, and where did that lead him? Beheaded. I mean, Jesus' ministry was the complete counsel of God, and where did that lead him? Crucifixion. I mean, his apostles and disciples after him, persecuted and hated and ostracized and tortured and fed to animals and crucified and beheaded and burned alive. I mean, what is the common theme here? They preached the true gospel and did not compromise. They did not shrink back. And look where this led them. Yes, it led them down a rough road. And guess what? We're called to do the same, no matter what. Boldly and lovingly sharing the whole counsel of God in the true gospel, inspired by the Spirit of God, not your flesh. You do nothing for God on your own power because 100% of the time it will fail, and it will fail miserably. Guys, we live boldly. We proclaim boldly. We love boldly. Remember, Christians, the gospel is like a lion. You never need to defend it. Just let it out of the cage and it will do what it does. Church, we've been called to be the light of the world and the salt of the earth. We have been called to be light bearers that pierce darkness. We have been called to bring flavor to this flavorless world. And the way to do this is to point people to Jesus, never compromising, never shrinking back, never fearful, only with bold confidence that shows that we actually believe what this book says. And so I leave you with this. Do you really believe this book? Because if you do, let your life show it.